We had a fascinating segment on NBA Today, where the panel broke down some big news coming out of New York. The Knicks have officially made a move that many around the league, and especially their fans, had been anticipating for months. This wasn't just any roster decision. It was a signing that immediately gives us insight into what Mike Brown's rotations might look like, and, perhaps more importantly, what direction Leon Rose and the front office are taking as they continue shaping this roster. When this came out live on the show, the first thing that stood out was how perfectly this move aligns with what Knicks fans had been demanding. For weeks, there had been speculation about how the team would use that final roster spot, particularly with a veteran's minimum contract available. A lot of the chatter centered on whether it would be Ben Simmons or Landry Shamet. Simmons, of course, showed no interest in New York, which left a lot of people wondering what the next step would be. Then came the breaking update from Shams Charania. Free agent guard Landry Shamet has agreed to return to the New York Knicks on a one-year deal. His agent confirmed the news, and just like that, Shamet is back for his 8th season in the league. And on NBA Today, the analysts emphasized how much sense this signing makes for both sides. Last year was a tough one for Shamet in New York. He was supposed to contribute right away, but after suffering a dislocated shoulder, he missed half the season. When he did return, he struggled to find his rhythm at first, but eventually he settled in and carved out a role as the 9th or 10th man in the rotation. In that role, he provided around 6 points per game, grabbed a rebound here and there, but most importantly, he shot 40% from three. That includes an incredible 47% on corner threes, which is a number that jumps off the page for any team looking to add reliable spacing. And that's exactly what New York needed. Even after a slow shooting start coming back from injury, Shamet regained his form and proved that he remains one of the league's most dangerous shooters when he's set and in rhythm. That's why this move was described on the show as massive for the Knicks. Shamet may not be a star, but he fills a critical gap that this roster had going into the new season. Something else that NBA Today highlighted was how Shamet has started to build a connection with the New York fan base. After playing on the Knicks team that made the Eastern Conference Finals, their first trip that deep into the playoffs since 2000, he mentioned being stopped and recognized by fans in the city more than ever before. That tells you he's starting to feel part of the culture here, and that matters in a city like New York, where role players who embrace the spotlight often end up becoming fan favorites. Now, of course, Shamet has other passions off the court, photography being one of them. He's spoken openly about pursuing that career after basketball. But, as was pointed out during the discussion, all of that has to wait, because right now, the Knicks need him locked in for a run at something bigger, competing for an NBA championship. And this is where Mike Brown enters the picture. NBA Today really stressed how perfectly Shamet fits into Brown's system. If there's one thing Brown has always been good at, it's optimizing three-point looks. We've seen it time and time again with his previous teams, and now he gets another high-volume, quick-trigger shooter to slot into his offense. For the Knicks, who already have great shooters like Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, and Deuce McBride, what they were missing was exactly this: a pure marksman who doesn't hesitate, who can run off screens, and who can hit those shots under pressure. Shamet checks that box. The comparison that was made on the show is that Shamet is like a discount Dante, a nod to players who carve out careers as elite complementary shooters. And while that may sound like a casual line, the point is clear. Shamet doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact, but when he's out there, defenses have to respect his shooting, and that changes the geometry of the floor. In fact, Tommy Beer pointed out that over the Knicks' final 10 games of the regular season, Shamet averaged 12.2 points, hit 3.3 threes per game, and did so while shooting 49% from the field, 49% from deep, and 100% from the line. Those are elite numbers, and the only player in the entire league who was hitting more than 7 made threes per 36 minutes in that span was Steph Curry. That puts Shamet in elite company, and it tells you just how important this signing could be. So, to sum it up, What came across very clearly on NBA Today is that this isn't just about filling the last roster spot. This is about sending a message. The Knicks know exactly what they need, and they're going out and addressing it. Landry Shamet gives them shooting, depth, defense, and another reliable veteran voice in the locker room. And for a team with championship aspirations, that's exactly the kind of move you need to make. On NBA Today, the conversation quickly shifted from simply announcing the move to really breaking down what Landry Shamet means for this Knicks team moving forward. One of the points that was brought up immediately was the comparison to Donte DiVincenzo, who became something of a cult hero during his time in New York. The panel emphasized that Shamet might not have the same overall impact, but he brings a very similar mentality. He's a fighter, a bulldog, the kind of gritty player who doesn't shy away from the physicality of the game. And that's exactly the type of personality that New York embraces. As Carmelo Anthony once said about players who make a difference in this city, sometimes it's just about putting on that hard hat and going to work. That's what Shamet does. He knows his role, he embraces it, and he executes it with confidence. Almost 68% of his shot attempts last season came from behind the three-point line. That tells you everything you need to know. He understands why he's on the floor, and that's to give this team instant shooting. Another detail that came out was from Ian Begley, who reported that Shamet did in fact have other options in free agency, but he chose to return to New York because of continuity, because he liked the locker room, felt comfortable in the city, and wanted to be part of this team's chase for a championship. That's important. For a player who's bounced around as much as Shamet has, starting as a promising rookie with the 76ers, moving to the Clippers, then the Nets, the Suns, and even a stop with the Wizards, choosing stability with the Knicks says a lot. He's been somewhat of a journeyman, a nomad in the NBA, but here in New York, he's found a place he genuinely enjoys, and that matters for both his play and his presence in the locker room. The panel also pointed out something fun. Off the court, Shamet has been spending time on his photography, even working at events like the US Open. But as was joked about on the show, all of that is going on the back burner because the Knicks have bigger goals. He knows his job now is to help this team push further than they did last year, and he's fully committed to doing just that. Then the discussion turned to the Knicks' depth chart. And this is where things get even more interesting. Assuming Mitchell Robinson is back in the starting lineup, and that is the expectation, the projected starters are Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns, and Robinson. That's already a formidable five, a lineup that has the size, the shooting, and the defense to match up with anyone in the league. But it's the bench that drew the most attention. According to what was discussed, Jordan Clarkson is expected to lead that second unit, likely playing the point guard role over Miles McBride, who the coaching staff prefers to use more as a two. Behind him, you've got Josh Hart, who can slide seamlessly between the forward spots. You've got Gershon Yabusele providing depth in the front court, with Ariel Hookporty waiting for minutes behind Robinson and Towns. And then there's Landry Shamet, of course, who now becomes that instant shooting threat off the bench. What stood out most during the segment was the balance and versatility of this bench unit. Clarkson, at any moment, is capable of putting up numbers that remind you why he once won the Sixth Man of the Year. Hart, if he comes off the bench, plays with such relentless energy that he could contend for that same award. Even McBride, at one point last season, was being mentioned as a dark horse in the sixth man conversation. That kind of depth just didn't exist for New York a year ago. And it's a huge credit to Leon Rose and the front office for building a bench that can actually change games. NBA Today made it clear. The Knicks already proved their starting five could compete with the very best. After all, they went to the conference final. But where they faltered was depth. Now, with players like Shamet, Clarkson, and Yabusele joining an already strong supporting cast, Mike Brown has options he didn't have before. He can manage minutes differently, keep his stars fresh, and still put out competitive lineups every time the bench checks in. And that's what made this move so important. It's not just about Shamet the shooter, it's about what his signing represents. A Knicks roster that is deeper, more balanced, and better equipped to survive the grind of an 82-92 game season and the intensity of a long playoff run. On NBA Today, one of the comparisons that came up immediately was the decision between Landry Shamet and Ben Simmons, and it was pointed out clearly this was never really a tough call. The panel reminded everyone of how Simmons was essentially played off the floor during the playoffs. He wasn't aggressive, he didn't look engaged, and there was even a sense that basketball is no longer his top priority. For a team like the Knicks, who are trying to build a contender around toughness, accountability, and reliability, bringing in Simmons simply didn't make sense. Shamet, on the other hand, checked every box in terms of fit, mentality, and what this roster actually needed. The conversation then shifted to the Knicks' rookie situation. Right now, they're evaluating whether to give that last contract to Mohamed Diawara or Dink Pate. Diawara put up solid numbers in Summer League, about 7 points, 5 rebounds, close to 2 assists, plus a steal per game. But his efficiency left a lot to be desired, shooting just 40% from the field and 15% from 3. On the other side, Pate, despite playing fewer minutes, managed to post better overall production across the board. He scored more, rebounded more, distributed more, and did it with better shooting percentages. The analysts made a compelling point. Dink Pate simply looks a little further along in his development. He's versatile, he has a unique skill set, and he feels like the type of young player you'd rather invest a full roster spot in, rather than keeping him tucked away on a two-way deal. That decision will be worth monitoring, because it also reflects how the front office and Mike Brown view the balance between short-term depth and long-term growth. And speaking of Mike Brown, what became clear during the discussion is that we now have a better sense of how he wants this roster to look. The Knicks front office had been rumored to be chasing more guard depth all offseason, which is part of the reason they even entertained the Simmons idea in the first place. But as the panel stressed, with Shamet re-signed and with Jordan Clarkson now in the mix, do the Knicks really need another ball handler? The answer might be no. Clarkson is the underrated signing that people aren't talking enough about. Last season, he averaged over 16 points per game, 3 rebounds, nearly 4 assists, while shooting a respectable 36% from beyond the arc. But more importantly, he's done it in the postseason. With the Utah Jazz, he put up close to 17 points a night across multiple playoff runs. He's fearless, he's comfortable with the ball in his hands, and he can absolutely slide into that backup point guard role when needed. To act like Clarkson can't be that secondary ball handler is ignoring the evidence we already have from his career. And then there's Guerschon Yabusele, another under-the-radar but very important addition. He brings energy, toughness, and shooting, averaging 11 points, nearly 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and hitting 38% of his threes last season. His presence on that second unit, alongside Clarkson and Shamet, gives New York a bench that is suddenly dynamic, versatile, and more dangerous than it has been in years. The bottom line coming out of the NBA Today segment was simple. This Knicks roster is real. Shamet provides shooting and grit. Clarkson brings scoring and playmaking. Yabusele adds size and versatility. And the rookies give them options to build for the future. Combine that with a starting lineup that already proved it can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the league, and you're looking at a group that has both the talent and the depth to make another deep postseason run. Fans should be excited, because the Knicks didn't just fill a roster spot. They made a choice that reflects a clear plan. They chose players who want to be here, who fit the system, and who make the team tougher and deeper. And as the panel closed by saying, "Don't expect this to be the last move," the Knicks are far from done. This front office has shown that it's willing to stay aggressive. And with trade season looming in January and February, New York could still be lining up for another big swing. So, while today's headlines belong to Landry Shamet, the larger story is this. The Knicks are building a roster with championship intent, and they're doing it one smart move at a time. The conversation around the New York Knicks took a surprising turn on NBA Today, and it really set the stage for where this franchise stands as training camp gets closer. The discussion began with the report that the Knicks had been officially denied in their pursuit of one of Europe's most intriguing rising stars. According to multiple outlets, Maccabi Tel Aviv rejected New York's request to bring in their top center, Roman Sorcin, for even a short trial period. And that decision left many wondering, what exactly is the Knicks' plan going forward? And why did this attempt come so late in the offseason? On the program, the panel highlighted that New York has been carrying an open roster spot for weeks, with a veteran minimum contract ready to use. Initially, the expectation was clear. They wanted to add another ball-handling guard to the rotation. That was the narrative all summer long. The Knicks had been connected to guards like Malcolm Brogdon, who could stabilize the second unit, and Landry Shamet, a proven three-point shooter with playoff experience. But then, in a surprising pivot, reports surfaced that the front office was turning its attention to a power forward or center from the EuroLeague, with Roman Sorcin being at the very top of their list. The issue, as discussed on NBA Today, is not that Sorcin lacks talent. In fact, he's been considered one of the most promising European bigs, a versatile 6'10" presence with the ability to stretch the floor and rebound at a high level. But timing mattered, and this is where the Knicks got caught flat-footed. The analysts pointed out that Sorcin had an NBA opt-out clause in his contract, but it expired back on July 28. That was the window for New York to act. Had the Knicks been aggressive earlier in the summer, they might have had a real shot. Instead, they waited until September, at a time when Maccabi Tel Aviv is preparing for its own season, counting on Sorcin to be their lead center. At that point, it was always going to be nearly impossible for the team to let him go. What made this even more frustrating, according to the panel, is that people close to Sorcin himself were surprised by the decision. Many believed the club would have given him the opportunity to at least showcase his game in front of an NBA staff, especially with New York offering up to $1 million for the trial arrangement. But Tel Aviv stood firm, making it clear that their priorities were with their season ahead and not accommodating NBA franchises at this late stage. The Knicks, as a result, walked away with nothing but questions about how the situation was handled. And here's the reality. By missing that deadline, the Knicks now have to wait until next summer if they want another shot at Sorcin. By then, he'll be a year older, and the question becomes whether he'll still be able to translate his game effectively to the NBA level. On NBA Today, the sentiment was that this entire episode felt like a wasted opportunity, and it raised legitimate concerns about the front office's timing and decision-making. If you wanted this player badly enough, why not pursue him earlier? Why not make the call when his clause was still active? Instead, the Knicks tried to pivot late, and now they're left scrambling. From there, the conversation shifted to what this means for New York's immediate future. Training camp is just around the corner, and the Knicks still don't have that last roster spot filled. The panel emphasized that this denial from Maccabi Tel Aviv forces the Knicks to turn back to the original plan, finding a guard who can bring depth, spacing, and reliable ball handling. That brings the focus right back to names like Landry Shamet and Malcolm Brogdon. One thing that stood out was the optimism around Shamet. The show reminded everyone that Shamet has already proven himself in New York's system, and his three-point shooting would be a major weapon off the bench. In fact, the analysts recalled how crucial he was in the postseason, not only hitting big shots, but also playing impressive defense, including memorable moments against TJ McConnell at Madison Square Garden. That's why, as the panel agreed, he remains the frontrunner for that final roster spot. Still, they didn't dismiss the idea of Brogdon either. In fact, one analyst said that if the Knicks could land Brogdon, it might be the more impactful move long-term. But the key takeaway was clear. With Sorcin officially off the table, New York can't afford to waste any more time. Decisions need to be made before camp opens, and the Knicks have to lock in their roster if they want to maximize their potential this season. On NBA Today, the conversation naturally shifted to the other names still on the Knicks' radar, and one of the most intriguing possibilities mentioned was Malcolm Brogdon. The panel broke it down this way. With Brogdon, you're not just getting another guard, you're getting a true ball handler, someone who can settle the offense, run the second unit, and step in as a reliable backup for Jalen Brunson. That's been the glaring need all summer long for New York, and Brogdon checks nearly every box. He's steady, he's experienced, he facilitates, and he defends at a high level. In short, he brings exactly the type of presence that could elevate the Knicks' depth and give them insurance when Brunson needs a breather. But as the analysts pointed out, there's one big problem that has always followed Brogdon throughout his career: his health. As talented as he is, it feels like he's constantly dealing with something, whether it's a nagging injury, a recovery setback, or simply being unavailable when his team needs him most. And when you're a franchise like the Knicks, a team with postseason expectations and aspirations of finally breaking through to the NBA Finals, that risk becomes magnified. Do you really want to invest in a player who might not be there when the lights shine the brightest? That's the question New York's front office has to weigh carefully. Now, while some players carry the label of injury-prone, others sit at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. That led the show to pivot briefly into a broader discussion about the MVP race heading into this season. They pulled up the latest FanDuel odds, and it gave everyone a fresh look at where the league's brightest stars currently stand. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander topped the list at 160, a reflection of just how dominant he was last season with Oklahoma City. Right behind him sat Nikola Jokic at + 310, Luka Doncic at + 370, and then Giannis Antetokounmpo at + 1200. The numbers tell the story. The gap between the top three and the rest is significant. Victor Wembanyama, the rookie sensation turned sophomore, is already climbing the board at + 1400. Anthony Edwards follows at + 2500. Kevin Durant at + 5000, and even Cade Cunningham has his name in the mix at + 6000. But perhaps the most eye-catching part of that list for New York fans was seeing Jalen Brunson's name at the very bottom, sitting at 8000. Think about that for a second. Just a couple of years ago, no one would have considered Brunson an MVP-caliber player. Now, after back-to-back seasons of growth and a playoff run where he looked like one of the best guards in basketball, Brunson's name is at least in the conversation. That's a testament to his rise and to how far the Knicks have come in building around him. After that, the discussion circled right back to the Knicks roster situation, which at this point has become one of the most talked-about topics around the league. With Roman Sorcin officially off the table after Maccabi Tel Aviv refused to even entertain New York's request, and with Ben Simmons no longer viewed as a realistic or viable option, the choices have narrowed significantly. The panel pointed out that the Knicks' front office is essentially down to two names for that final roster spot: Malcolm Brogdon and Landry Shamet. And according to the conversation on the show, Shamet has emerged as the clear frontrunner. The reasoning behind this is straightforward, but also very compelling. Shamet doesn't just provide shooting, he provides elite floor spacing, something that every team with championship aspirations values highly. He's a career 38% shooter from deep, and the Knicks saw firsthand last season how valuable he can be when the pressure is at its peak. He understands New York's system, he already has built-in chemistry with the locker room, and he is comfortable playing in his role. That kind of familiarity matters. It means fewer growing pains, less time adjusting, and more immediate impact. But it's not just about his shooting stroke. The panel also reminded viewers of Shamet's defensive presence. This is something that tends to get overlooked when people talk about his game. There were moments in last year's postseason where fans inside Madison Square Garden were chanting his name because of the defensive energy he brought, specifically the way he hounded opposing guards like TJ McConnell. When you combine that defensive effort with his ability to knock down shots consistently, what you're really getting is a player who embraces doing the little thing, spacing the floor, staying locked in defensively, and never needing plays drawn up for him to make a difference. Now, that's not to say Malcolm Brogdon wouldn't bring tremendous value if the Knicks decided to go in that direction. In fact, one analyst on the panel made the argument that if Brogdon could remain healthy, his overall impact would surpass Shamet's. Brogdon is a true ball-handling guard who can step in as a backup for Jalen Brunson, stabilize the second unit, and give the Knicks another player who can initiate the offense. On top of that, he's an excellent perimeter defender and has proven throughout his career that he can perform in high-leverage playoff situations. In many ways, he checks off more boxes than Shamet. But here's where the consensus started to form. Availability, as the panel kept repeating, is the best ability. And when you look at Brogdon's track record, there's just no ignoring the constant injuries that have followed him throughout his career. The analysts stressed that New York cannot afford to gamble on someone who might not even be available when the postseason rolls around. For a team with legitimate finals aspirations, the margin for error is razor-thin. Shamet, while maybe not as versatile or dynamic as Brogdon, represents the safer and more reliable option. He's healthy, he's steady, and he has already shown he can fit seamlessly into what the Knicks are building. So, while Brogdon's ceiling as a signing might be higher, the floor with Shamet is far more secure. And that's why, at this stage of the offseason, with training camp rapidly approaching, the Knicks appear to be leaning heavily toward the option that offers certainty, stability, and continuity. The bottom line is this: training camp is just weeks away. Time is running out for New York to make a decision. The panel stressed that the sooner the Knicks finalize this last roster spot, the better. The team doesn't need lingering uncertainty heading into camp. They need clarity, roles defined, and rotations ready to be built. Whether it ends up being Shamet or Brogdon, the Knicks have to act fast, because hesitation has already cost them with the Sorcin situation.